This afternoon, the message title is The Image of God. It's the section we call Excursus in the book, The God Bias. So far, we've discussed the three aspects of the God bias. We have traced the line from the false stories of idolatry to the false communities of heresy and the false identities of hypocrisy. So before we go on to cover the two more aspects of the God bias, we feel at this point of the book or the sermon series, it is helpful for us to take a pause and revisit what we mean by the image of God. Because this term, or the idea of image of God, has big implications for the God bias. And ultimately, it actually balances what we're dealing with, and it gives us a hope for the good news that we have in our Lord Jesus Christ. Do you remember when we talked about that we are like God, but not God? So that's where we need to start. Dutch theologian Herman Bavinck said that God's image, his breath of life, can be observed in humanity. That's why people associate the breath of life with what philosophers, scientists, biologists, and psychologists call consciousness. It's a very popular term. It allows us to be fruitful, multiply, and have dominion over the world. And we will submit that this consciousness of the image of God has three aspects or three dimensions. First, cognitive, your thinking. Second, creative, your will to do something. And third, cooperative, that you live in community, you do things with people. So first, cognitive image is what we see in the image of God, and this is what the theologians would point out. So humans process information, consider its purpose, and implement it at a higher level than any other creature. What other creature uses a scientific method to make observations or theories? What other creature reasons with each other, categorizing creation and naming the laws of nature? Second aspect of the image of God is creative image. God created us to imagine what the world should and could be, rather than just see it as what it is. I mean, the creation itself is beautiful and is good as God created to be. But God gave human beings this image where you and I can imagine to improve or to better the creation. We express it through the arts and shape it through powerful new technologies. So we are for engineers, inventors. We are for advancements. We want to go past just describing the world and surviving in it. We want to define the world around us, rather than to be defined by it. So if you consider this creative image of God in us, then it is really not biblical for us to wanting to go back to the Stone Age where there's nothing and have everything as is, very primitive, undeveloped, uncultivated earth. Some people think that that's the ideal. But I would say, when you consider the image of God, no, that's not how God created us to be. God created us so that we can make the world a better place to live. And third aspect is a cooperative image. Humans are relational. I mean, this is all of us sitting here, being in this room, worshiping together, is a proof that we are relational. We want to know and be known by each other. We use language and form complex societies based on trust. We specialize and depend on each other's work, and we want future generations to build on the work we do. Our ability to do so is the only way that technology has continued to advance. And this is the reason why we want to leave legacy and rewrite history. We build monuments. What other animals or creatures do that? You see, the image of God is why humans value conscious life above all else. Even if mass starvation and murder are natural in Darwin's survival of the fittest reality or theory, they don't consider it natural. Why do we lament death? Why do we want justice? We constantly project the image of God, respecting the dignity and the choice of human beings, and insist that everyone should even live up to their potential. And if you think about it, where does that idea come from? Why do we believe in that potential? Everything that makes humans unique and good comes from the image of God. The Apostle Peter described it this way in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. It says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." Just think about that verse. Don't you feel good about yourself? Say, oh yeah, that's me. That's awesome. That's my identity. That's who you are. That's what God calls you to be. However, the image of God has another implication, because everything unique about about humans come from God, because we are made in the image of God. We are dependent on God. There's a connection, right? Image of God. So everything good about us, about human beings, has a relationship, has a connection with who God is. So that means, as you have said before, while humans are like God, they are not God. And it's a simple phrase, but I want to stress this again and again. If you and I can get this truth down, it will really help all of us with your even mental health, relational health, every aspect of your life. You are like God, but you're not God. Humans' morality is dependent on whether or not they align themselves with God, who is entirely self-sufficient. And this is the creator-creature distinction. The core question of Christianity is this: is the imago Dei, or the image of God in Latin, being expressed correctly or incorrectly? How do you use your cognitive, creative, and cooperative ability? What purpose are you serving? Are you pleasing others, yourself, or God? So this image of God helps us to understand the problems that we face as a result of sin. So God took the risk as well as promised the reward. If you were to ask the question, what allows mankind to sin? It is actually this image of God. Think about it. Plants, animals, and rocks cannot sin. They do not sin. They just don't have that category. You don't describe plants and animals and natural world sinning. Humans can sin only because of their moral agency. You and I can sin because we have received this moral agency, the ability to choose. That's why we don't punish trees like we do human beings. We expect humans to manage their instincts rather than just going along with cause and effect or letting people do whatever they want. Animals behave according to instincts. Plants grow according to their DNA. What do people say when humans behave the way they want to do, whatever they like? Saying someone is made in the image of God is not just a compliment. It is a responsibility. Like a heavy hammer or a sharp knife. Think of hammer and think of knife. It can either do a lot of good or evil, depending on how it is used. You can use your knife to cook a delicious meal for your family, or you can use your knife to butcher and kill your family members, as we have seen and heard on the news. That's why the image of God comes with restrictions and limitations. And it has been used poorly many times in history. You probably heard the phrase, ultimate power corrupts ultimately. C.S. Lewis said, there is but one good, that is God. Everything else is good when it looks to Him, and bad when it turns from Him. And the higher and mightier it is in the natural order, the more demoniac it will be if it rebels. And this is why C.S. Lewis has reserved the criticism for the religious leaders. And actually that's what we heard Jesus criticize, speak against the scribes and the Pharisees, calling them hypocrites, because they are in leadership position. Did Adam and Eve eat the fruit because they wanted to be evil? If you think about it, even people who do bad things, who steal, who kill, who destroy, why do they do that? Because they want to steal someone else's good. Or if you consider a serial killer, that serial killer will have some type of fun or pleasure in committing the crimes he's committing. There's always good that's involved. No, Adam and Eve ate the fruit because they thought it was good, tasty, aesthetic, and enlightening. Satan cannot create evil. He can only distort good things. And he misdirects the image of God through bias, the God bias we're talking about. Evil does not think it is evil. Evil thinks it is good, and thinks it can be good apart from God. So think about what Adam and Eve did, or think about all the decisions you made, thinking that it was good for you, but was it worth it? Without the image of God, man cannot sin, but they would not be capable of experiencing freedom love, or joy either. As C.S. Lewis put it, try to exclude the possibility of suffering which the order of nature and the existence of free wills involve, and you find that you have excluded life itself. You probably need to read that sentence one more time on your own to follow the logic that Lewis is making here. And the Bible helps us to understand. Romans chapter 8 verse 18 clearly states, God thought creating man in his own image was worth the risk. Apostle Paul says, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. I know that's what the Bible says, but when you face problems in your life, when you encounter evil being done against you, it's a different ballgame, right? The problem of evil. Unfortunately, many choose to say it wasn't worth it for those people who are suffering so much. Why did God make the world? Why did God make me this way? They blame God for the existence of pain and evil. So, for example, we have this intellectual whose name is Stephen Fry. He has called God an evil, capricious, monstrous maniac, without whom life would be simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living. I mean, he speaks for all the people in the world who believe that religion and religious people are the problem. I know some of you might be thinking, I think so, Pastor. Think about the war that's going on in Israel, between Israel and Hamas. It's all religious. People blame God for not creating the world the way they want, or the ideal life that they're imagining. Or people argue that God exists because of all the good things that are in the world. But isn't this biased? If you think about it, people say God must exist because of all the things I like. Or people say God must not exist because of all the things I don't like. If there are a lot of the things that you like in life and in the world, then you say, oh, God exists. But if you see a lot of things in your life and the world that's bad and evil, you don't like it, man, God doesn't exist. Have you heard people talk like that? Or do you feel that way? You might say, God, I know you're there, but you don't feel close. Look at all the problems. Look at all the issues that I'm going through. My life is so hard. Why do you make my life so hard? Are you really there, God? It's a shallow thinking. Yes, genocide, wars, and rotten eggs exist. Yes, love and puppies exist too. I know that's why you spend so much time looking at puppies and cats. I know that's what I fall for, all these little puppies on social media. But think about it, neither proves or disapproves God's existence. If you connect the good things to say, oh, because I experience all these good things, God must exist. Or, oh, look at all the bad things I experienced. Because of all these bad things, God does not exist, or He should not exist. If He existed, then why are all these bad things happening? It's too easy to just blame God for everything you don't like and take credit for everything you like. People base their ideas of right and wrong on this bias, rather than asking where their desire for truth and goodness come from. Why do you want good things in life? Why do you enjoy looking at puppies? Our ability to make moral judgments comes from God, but we are using it to deny His existence. The problem with blaming God for evil is like sawing off the tree branch you're sitting on. It's like plugging the power strip into itself. The extension cord, right? The power cord. You put it in the power strip itself and wondering why you don't have any power. In defining our own morality, we separate ourselves from the source of morality. We love freedom, but not duty. We love choices, but not consequences. We love rights, but not responsibilities. We're not content with the image of God. We want to be the creator, all-powerful, all-present, and all-knowing. This is the God bias that I'm hoping and praying that we are aware of. This is why people try to live their own truth, ignoring all kinds of relational, moral, financial, and even biological limits. The problem with denying the image of God is that it removes the reason we respect dignity and care for humans. All the good things both religious and non-religious people love and idealize. Without the image of God, we have no grounds to really call things right and wrong, even the worst criminals in history. And we are removed from the healthy limits, the pruning and the guidance that God provides. We have no grounds for dignity of people. We have no grounds for the rights of people. Where do people get the idea of human rights? Where do your standards of right and wrong come from? Where did you learn them? Is God your source of goodness, or do you feel worthy of judging God? And this is the question that we need to answer. Is He really the Creator? Many Christians are leaving faith, or deconstructing, or losing trust in God, or losing trust in churches or organized religion. So this reality is very difficult. And in some sense, in some ways, I think it's actually helpful. Because people are really getting to the bottom of what they really believe in. Because this causes a crisis of meaning. And if you remember, this is the reason why the church never really discussed verses like Job chapter 3, verse 1 through 3, or 11, or Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 2 and 3, because they want to avoid the harsh reality of how the image of God is a responsibility and not just a right. Let's look at Job 3. It says, after this is referring to all the suffering, loss of his property, loss of his children, loss of his health, he opened his mouth and cursed the day of his day of his birth. And Job said, "Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived, why did I not die at birth? Come out from the womb and expire. Oh, why was I not as a hidden, stillborn child, as infants who never see the light? And I thought the dead who are already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun." And I'm sure many people have experienced the loss of their loved ones. And unimaginable evil could relate to what Job has said. While we're unable to explain why the hard reality of the creator-creature distinction exists, here's what we do know. God does not ignore our struggle. Rather, Christ himself experienced it. And this is what gives us hope as we consider the God bias, how we do not recognize the distinction between creator and creature. Jesus Christ has come to undo the evil, meaning he has come to show us what it looks like to be a creature and what it looks like to worship the Creator. So in the whole process, the Son of God wondered if there was any other way, if you remember his words. And yet he bore the cross. He had faith that it was indeed the only way. He says, and going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." How did Jesus engage the problem of evil? How was he able to forgive those who persecuted and those who hurt him physically and ultimately crucified him on the cross? It's his trust in his Father's love for him. And it is his submission as a creature to the Creator. It is fully acknowledging the distinction that he's creature, human being, and that his life, his livelihood, his destiny, everything about who he is dependent upon the Creator's will. It's that trust. In John chapter 9, upon encountering a blind man, who did Jesus blame? He does not blame the man who was born blind or his parents, as many judgmental people would, or Job's friends have done. You must have sinned, Job, for you to suffer like this. And that's where everyone will go. If you experience any evil or bad things, if they don't ask you, they'll think in their minds, he or she must deserve that. Jesus does not minimize or ignore his suffering. He does not blame God or the person or the parents. Now, like many consumer Christians would, right? We don't want to talk about the bad things. We don't want to talk about the pain and suffering. We just want to go quickly to the good news. Jesus is coming back. Yes. Praise the Lord. Let's worship God and go home happy. That's true. But when you look at Jesus, he engaged with the man, as well as the suffering of the world. Jesus experienced the full range of human sorrow, frustration, and anger, But we do not see him blame the Creator. We do not see Jesus criticizing his Father. Jesus simply did what you and I are supposed to do with the image of God all along. With the creative, cognitive, and cooperative aspects of how God made us, Jesus loved God and he loved others. If Jesus is a person that shows us what the image of God really looks like and how it is lived out, and if you call yourself as a follower of Jesus, and how would you answer the question about the problem of evil? What's your opinion about the world? Was being made in God's image worth it, as Paul said, or was it not? Will you accept your place as a creature or not? Created in God's image, being like God, but not God. Do you think goodness comes from you or from outside of you? And that's what I want to invite you to remember and celebrate. When you receive communion, what you're saying is the bread and the cup you receive, you're receiving the righteousness and the forgiveness that is not yours, that you did not work for, that you did not produce. You're receiving the righteousness of other Christ. You're receiving the forgiveness that is made possible by Jesus. So will you listen to Jesus, who gives you the good news, who invites you to live as God's dearly beloved, as God's children? Or would you listen to the God bias, the idolatrous story, the heretical community, and the hypocritical identity? Ultimately, your answer will be one of faith. Yes, either you will believe in God or you will believe in yourself. And I hope and pray that as we all confessed with the Apostles' Creed, that you and I will all believe in the triune God, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit.